The Trump Justice Department was forced to release millions of new Epstein files. We're still going through them. I'm going to show you some of the key ones and what we're learning. I'm Ari Melber, attorney and journalist. There's been a lot of coverage of this and a lot of headlines and social media looking at certain names and certain emails. We've built a timeline here on the beat on MS Now to look at some of the key points. We all know the probe against Epstein started here in Florida all the way back here in the early 2000s, around 2005 in the Bush era. What we've learned new for the first time in the 3 million files is that while he was indicted there was a sex trafficking indictment of him at DOJ under the Bush Justice Department that was discarded. Now, we've heard a lot about the sweetheart deal, but what the government essentially has been hiding for all these years is that they had a 55-page plus case with evidence, with witnesses, written up, ready to go, and that was discarded. So instead, Epstein was indicted and given only a year in prison. This case would have ended everything. He could have been in prison for decades if convicted. And so the files are showing part of why the government may have covered it up. Some people may be in the files. Some people may have reasons to cover up what they may have done or visited or their relation with Epstein. But we also see why government cover-ups can last. This was the same thing we've seen back all the way to Nixon and Watergate. If the government had this written case and everything we know now about Epstein, and yet it was pulled and they gave him this sweetheart deal, well, that puts a lot of pressure on everyone. The files now show us this, which is why this transparency is constructive, even if there's still secrecy to be fought. If you want more details, it was Alex Acosta, later promoted by Trump into his first-term cabinet, who struck this deal. Epstein had hired Republican lawyers and other politicos and powerful people, and apparently got this thing pulled. This was also around the time that a current Trump official, Lutnick, said was his last contact with Epstein. And he rode that defense for many years. He's still in the Trump cabinet today, but the new files show that was also false by his own emails. I'm going to show you a few other things we're learning. As for the emails, and these have gotten a lot of attention, all the way back then, Lutnick said last contact, but he was actually emailing to arrange a visit to the island, and later, there was an email from another associate saying it was nice to see someone in his group. He's denying that he went. Elon Musk, who famously accused Donald Trump of being in the Epstein files, the new files show him saying he wanted to come on the wildest party night, day or night, asking about that. He says he never went down there. But this, again, shows just how many important, powerful people. Musk was like a super cabinet official, and they were all fighting against having these files released, against what Congress ultimately passed, and this gives us a lot more information why. We knew that the Miami Herald is what reopened this case with public pressure, which started the Trump DOJ probe. Everybody knows that Epstein was indicted, died in prison. Under the Trump DOJ, they say they lost the video footage, but they ruled it an apparent suicide. That remains under scrutiny because the Epstein transparency law asks for a lot more information about that. But here's what's new. This is a suspect list. This is what the feds internally had with Epstein at the center, some people redacted, and several other people, his lawyer, accountant, and others, with lines coming off of him. And yet, to this day, the DOJ never pursued these cases, even though we now see something you rarely see, a kind of a mob suspect list chart they were building of who to follow. So one of the things we're going to continue to report on is why that and later Justice Departments didn't pursue those leads. You can always subscribe to us on YouTube here for these legal breakdowns and stay informed. Hey, it's Ari and 50. Don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe.
I just can tell you, this is a rare view inside a normally secret federal probe. You almost never see this type of thing before, during, or after a case, and the federal laws protect that. What's different here, of course, is Congress changed the laws for this particular mess of Epstein and the secrecy. So we have questions stoked here about why the feds, under first Trump and then the Biden DOJ, did not apparently pursue and indict most of these men, or the others who knew or partook in what the government also calls a broad sex trafficking ring. Which is it? A giant sex trafficking ring with someone at the center and other men involved in crimes, knowing and otherwise? Or not? And if it's not, then what were the feds doing with their chart and their leads? I can tell you we have redactions here, some of which may be for potential victims or those that the government viewed as more coerced into being a part of these crimes rather than being the ringleader or the proactive criminal. And the feds tracking Epstein's lawyer, accountant, financial advisor, and a man later indicted in Europe for sex offenses who died in prison awaiting trial, as did Epstein in 2019. But there's a lot of questions here about these leads. Some of these individuals, I should mention, are still being subpoenaed by Democrats in Congress to try to get more information where apparently the DOJ stopped. Now, I mentioned the death in prison. The Trump DOJ stated that the videos that were key around where Epstein was in that cell, that the videos were lost. So I'm going to go all the way back here for round 2 of our timeline. Then Trump Attorney General Barr was defending the fact that videos were missing. The DOJ did go after one co-conspirator that now has become a bit of a household name, Maxwell, and she was convicted and sentenced here to 20 years. The public demands for transparency, the pressure on this case built over time. I think everybody knows that by now. And so Trump was eventually campaigning on declassification. We all lived through his attorney general saying she had a client list on her desk. Then Attorney General Bondi announced no client list, no more files, no more videos, no evidence of blackmail. This was where the Trump administration tried to stop all this. And this wasn't that long ago. They said there wouldn't be any other evidence to be disclosed. And that stoked outrage from victims, from experts, from members of Congress, as well as many people who were in Trump's MAGA base, who were promised very recently other things by Bondi and Trump himself. Then Trump did something very unusual. He sent his loyal attorney, now at the DOJ, for this unusual interview with Maxwell, as I've reminded you, the only other person charged for anything. And she was upgraded to a better prison facility. As for Musk, whose emails had not been exposed yet, well, he was claiming that Trump was in the files when they had their fallout. Again, the timeline is striking because we now know what Musk knew apparently, but no one else did in public, which is that he was asking to go down to the island by email. Musk, who understands technology, knew or had reason to know he was in the files. As for Lutnick, well, remember, he claimed he wasn't involved or in contact. That is undercut by the emails. And at this time, whether he realized the files were ever going to come out or not, he was working for an administration that now was backing secrecy. He then was talking, while in office, about Epstein being a blackmailer.
That's what his MO was, you know, get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume, was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever. Blackmailed people. That's how he had money.
Not just a blackmailer, says Lutnick, but one of the greatest. That's like saying a greatest drug deal ever or greatest criminal conspirator ever. It means that Lutnick is saying this guy did this a lot, even though his fellow cabinet official, Pam Bondi, was recently saying there was no blackmail and nothing else. And now the files suggest there was certainly a lot of people that there were leads for. So this is the tension inside the Trump administration with people that we're now learning were in the files, were emailing with Epstein, were discussing potentially visiting him while they talk about his blackmail operation. Then we get to recent history. Trump, of course, losing the battle to stop the Epstein law. It passed overwhelmingly. It required the DOJ to release the files by the end of December. They started with basically under 1% and heavy redactions, which we'll see here. And then, over 40 days past due, and thus breaking the law, after those 13,000 files, you get this new batch of 3 million. And many of the files have incriminating material that we've highlighted here, which can make more sense in the broader timeline. DOJ says this is the final drop. Epstein's accusers, though, note that after all of this delay, some lying, these errors, Trump keeping officials in his cabinet who now have been caught lying about this and had some tie to Epstein while saying he's a blackmailer. After all of that, victims note that the DOJ still had redaction errors at a minimum, that they exposed some identities at the very same time that they seemed so intent to go to great lengths to delay, deny, defy, or protect some people in the files.
I don't think that there's a single survivor who's like, no, we shouldn't have done this. No, it needed to be done the right way. And it's just not. Everything was a power play. And now I'm feeling like
this is a power play.
Yes.
My response to his comment is like the age-old phrase, this isn't over until we say it's over. Meaning the 1,200 survivors fight for our right to see all the files.
They really failed all of the survivors on this.
It feels kind of in a way like additional intimidation, which is something that I think we all felt during our association with Jeffrey Epstein.
The original crimes not dealt with, sometimes covered up by the government lying, and then finally following the law that it was forced to follow because it was so overwhelmingly passed over any possible veto by the president, who keeps trying to hide the Epstein files. So these are just some of the key points we've learned about some of the key players who are still in government, exercising power now, as well as the way we got here. So I want to be clear about what we're learning, because there have been all sorts of articles about what's failed, or how people are getting away, or whether there will be consequences and accountability, whether that's in the public sphere of civic life and business, or even legally. We know more than ever now about the lengths that federal authorities from different administrations and powerful men and their well-paid allies, lawyers and others, were willing to go to bury these secrets. The obvious implication is it was not only to protect a controversial, then indicted, and later dead sex trafficker, but that they were trying to protect either themselves, the people who may have been a party to these crimes, including that chart of leads I showed you that we now know the government has had for years, or as well, government cover-ups, which we've seen in many dimensions, where because they failed to do the right thing, or somebody overruled the right thing, stopping that early case I showed you, you have powerful people in government and connected to their predecessors and successors who don't want to go back in and look at how these files show how the federal government has repeatedly failed victims and justice. These are millions of new files. Everyone is still going through and making sense of them. One thing I can tell you, when the truth starts outing, it's not going to stop. It's not just going to go away. Hey, it's Ari in 50. Don't forget to subscribe.
Subscribe.